And so, if we could, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Dennehy?
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez? Absent. Councilmember Jaquez?
Here.
Councilmember Reed? Absent. Councilmember Schmisher? Here. Councilmember B. Smith? Absent. Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick?
Here.
Mayor Smith? Absent.
Okay, tonight, we've got our agenda includes multi-unit water tap rates and American Recovery Plan funds. And with that, Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. So tonight we'll be talking about multifamily water tap rates. The backstory here is as Rick and I and Patrick from planning have been meeting with developers, specifically around multifamily, this topic continues to come up. And as we looked and researched the water tap rates for multifamily, it appears that there's a barrier to development for this particular type of housing unit within Canyon City. So we've only had a couple of multifamily units that have been built over the last couple of years. Journey Home is one of them, and that's a subsidized build. And then the units that were done for the Holiday Inn Express, which those are not necessarily, that's not market rate or private market development. That was meant for workforce housing for that particular development. So we're very glad that they did that, and we had some incentive agreements that were in place around that particular development because they were doing it as part of the hotel. But as we continue to look at this and analyze it, we think there's some opportunities here for at least making some changes, or at least on a temporary basis, providing some relief so we can try and see if there's opportunities out there and ability to turn over some additional stones. As we went through, we saw other communities structured their multi-units a couple of different ways. There were some that structured it the same way as Canyon City did. There's others that they just charge the tap fee for the building. The way that we currently do it is we charge the tap fee, so based on the size of the tap, or the number of units times the 3/4 inch rate, so whichever is greater. And then the third way that some communities do it is they use a formula based on tap equivalent or some other unit equivalent. So basically they use single family home as that base rate for that tap equivalent, and then they figure out what the water usage is going to be based off of the units and projected usage, and they charge based off of that, whatever that tap equivalent is. Another thing that we noticed, and probably something we want to clean up the next time we do a rate study, is moving away from the term tap fee to plant investment fee, because it really is, that's what the money goes towards. It goes towards our water acquisition fund, and it goes towards investment into the water treatment plant. So as we looked at the different communities, we looked at more communities than just these, but these were the ones that were comparable in size and distance from metro areas and things like that. You can see we charge $5,000 for our 3/4 inch tap, and you can see what all the other jurisdictions are doing there. And the prices go up based on the size of the tap as you move forward. And as you continue that analysis, there are some communities that charge for ADUs. We do not. So as we have these special review uses and in the new code, conditional uses for accessory dwelling units, that's not an additional fee for those that are trying to develop those units. And that is a form of housing stock that we do need in the community. So we don't have a barrier there. what we're seeing is when it comes to those multifamily rates, Durango and Montrose, they charge based off of the full bore on the first unit and then a discounted rate based off of every additional unit. And then we've got Pueblo West, which does it as Canyon City. Fountain does it based off of the tap size. And then Brighton down at the bottom, I don't know what they do for multifamily, but they have both water rates for if you're bringing water to the table, so water rights to the table, and if you don't. So that's why there's a difference in how they charge their water rates or their tap fees. So what we're recommending today is to come up with a 2-year incentive program for multifamily development. This would be multifamily only. We would not, provide these discounts on the commercial side. This is to encourage more homes being built in the community. Doing something similar to what Durango is doing. So full price for the first unit and then the 3/4 inch fee at a 50% discount for each additional unit afterwards. So in the first example, a 50-unit apartment, that was about $250,000 for a water tap. Under this incentive program, that water tap would drop down to about $122,000. The other recommendation that we're looking at is offering a discount on the building permit for the multifamily projects. If they're bringing 20 units or more, offering a 40% discount on the building permit. Again, we're trying to provide tools for Rick on the economic development side to encourage these types of developments in the community. And with that, open this, actually, Kim or Tammy, do you have any comments you want to add to this?
I only have one brief comment, a little bit about Brighton. If I remember correctly, when I worked there, it was based on a commercial. It was similar to a commercial use, so it was the tap fee was based on, a commercial tap fee. It was, we determined the tap size based on fixture counts, not necessarily on dwelling units. So it was, based on demand of the building, and then the building would have the appropriate size. Then they would meter on the insides of the building. So that's a little bit of background about what they did in Brighton.
So with that, we'd open up to questions or comments, try and get some direction on what council thinks.
Sure. Mandy?
So the 40% discount on the building permit part, how did we come up with 40% being what we wanted to do? Like, what's the thought process behind 40, not 50 or, 30 or whatever?
Yeah, so, the building department is a very labor-intensive,
Right.
and I sat down with Kathy and we kind of talked about, these types of units, and apartments are very similar to hotels. We know how many times we've been out to the Holiday Inn Express and other projects like that from a staff time perspective. And that we kind of worked it that way, trying to figure out what would be appropriate where the building department would still get enough money to pay for staff time, but still be able to provide a discount to the developer.
If we get a bunch of these coming in, I imagine that's going to be a lot more manpower for the building department. Is that still going to account for that possibility if necessary?
I think it would, and that's part of the reason why we're putting a 2-year restriction on this to, we want to build a sense of urgency, but we don't want to necessarily give away the farm forever.
That's what I was wondering. Thanks.
Frank?
My concern is going to be this. I understand what we're looking at, and it's a good thing to look at, but my concern is going to be when we look at doing what we're talking about, that doesn't have a negative approach on our budget within the water department and everything else, because all of a sudden, we were going to get this kind of money, which goes into the water department's funds and everything. Now we're going to get that much less. So that would be my greatest concern with regards to whatever incentives we do with regards to this tap fees and everything, is looking at it to make sure whatever we do does not adversely affect our water department's funds and stuff like that. And I also think the 2-year period is probably, you know, a good enough time frame to work with that. But like I say, as long as it doesn't affect the water department's budget and funding, I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. What we talked about as staff is that, you know, it's been 15 years. We haven't had one of these come in. So we're, you know, nothing ventured, nothing gained. We're not getting that revenue today. So I think the need for housing in the community is greater than what the any negative impacts might be to the housing or to the water department based off of a 2-year time period.
Tim?
All right, I have a question on this. Just, I mean, I can see the numbers, but on the 40%, is that a pretty standard, or is that just something that another community did? Could it be 30%?
On the building permit?
No, for the discount on the building permit.
Yeah, for the discount on the building permit, yes.
Is that a pretty standard?
This is something we came up with. We didn't
Okay.
shop this one.
Okay.
This is what we think that we can do and still cover our costs.
And I agree with this, because, you know, we might say we're discounting this, but if we build these units, the water, you know, we're gonna be selling the water, then, you know, there's your increase back in, so it's gonna offset each other. But I didn't know if there was a reason just on that number, or just something that you decided, and I'm good with it, but I was just kind of curious where that came from.
Yeah, on the building permit side, that was just working through how many times we think we're gonna have to go out there and making sure that we're covering our costs.
And then on the other, just when we're saying on the 2,500, would it be unrealistic to say, well, instead of 5,000, we're gonna go at 3, or do you think 2,500 is still adequate? Because again, if this happens and it builds, we're gonna see the increase back on the revenue side. I understand that.
Yeah, and I think there's some, you know, logic that you can go and you look at this from a discount standpoint, and it's the idea of the tap equivalents, right? So if you're looking at a multifamily apartment complex versus single-family homes, the amount of water that they're going to use for watering the lawn is going to be less than what an apartment complex is going to use. So from a justification standpoint, I think that's where that gets built in.
Okay, no, I'm good. Thank you.
Amy?
Thanks so much, Mayor Pro Tem Hamrick. Thank you so much, Ryan. It's really great to see kind of the creativity and thought that went into how do we attract more multifamily housing. I think similarly to my colleagues, it sounds like you've done the homework and that this would cover costs both on the building side and on the water department side. I guess I just had 2 questions regarding the water fee. One, what would a normal tap size be for, say, a 20-unit building?
Kim, would you venture a guess? My guess would probably be about a 2-inch line.
And he is correct. It's between 2 and 3 for average.
Okay. And then my second question would just be, I mean, I understand, as Councilmember Dennehy mentioned, that moving forward, we would be getting revenue off of the water, but would this cover the costs in terms of the physical plant improvement and kind of the cost if we did this kind of 50% discount?
Yeah, so that, you know, we are treating the tap fee as the plant investment fee, so yeah, that money would go back towards, you know, the water acquisition fund and plant improvements. And again, because we're not using these units would not be using nearly as much water as, say, a single-family home, I think that would cover the plant investment fee.
Okay. And then is there a reason why you would be looking at the Durango model as opposed to the 2 to 3 inch tap line fee model? I mean, it seems like the latter would be an even more significant discount, and if that's all that we're actually expecting them to, if we're expecting them to use less water, is there a reason why we would go with this model as opposed to, I'm not sure from the previous screen if it was Montrose or Fountain, the model of based on tap size?
Yeah. I think because you're going to have more units, and I think going straight tap fee doesn't account for the number of units that may be put in. You could have a 2 or 3 inch line that goes for, it could be 20 units, but you could probably fit a whole lot more units in there and still have the same size tap.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Mandy, I'll call on you in just a second. Tell me if I go wrong here in this analysis, but essentially, if you look at the water system as we have it, okay, there are operational costs. For instance, we have, the electricity costs and costs for chemicals, for treatment, and things like that. We also have capital costs that will come up because things wear out. For instance, the workers need pickup trucks, and generally, if you're going to replace a pickup truck, that's a capital type cost.
Yeah, if I could do one better, an actual capital cost at the water treatment plant is the filter media.
Yes.
So that filter media needs to be replaced probably about every 20 years or so, maybe less than that. And that's a huge capital cost that needs to be replaced.
Exactly, and so that's an example of capital costs. There are others. For instance, the replacement of our motor control center down there at the river pumping stations is an example of a capital cost. But the issue is that it's not like a dial. It's not like you turn it up as you get higher demand. You just turn things up and that your capital gradually increases, your capital costs gradually increase. What happens is you have these jumps where all of a sudden you can anticipate you don't have enough pumping capacity, which means more pumps. That's a capital cost, but that's a step increase and not something smooth. So in reducing what we charge for a tap fee, because we have both water acquisition costs, which we're not really talking about now, but capital costs, the risk is that you don't accumulate enough capital over a time period to cover either increased demand on your system or the larger capital items that you do have to spend on. And so right now, are we close to capacity anywhere in our system? Are we looking at, there's not, the other way to ask that question is based on budgetary numbers that you've seen, are we expecting major, other than filter media, which is really related to the quantity of water you pump through there, but other than filter media, is there demand type capital items we're going to have to be installing?
From a demand side, we still have quite a bit of capacity.
Quite a bit of capacity. And so right now, we're accumulating capital at a sufficient rate to cover our capital needs for repair and replacement as we go along.
I would say so, yes.
Okay, so the kind of where I'm coming to here is that even if we wanted to go a little bit lower on a tap fee, which is a one-time fee, and allow the increased demand to help us accumulate the necessary capital, we could probably look at a somewhat lower tap fee, could we not?
Well, the way we look at this is two different ways. The water rates and that ongoing usage, that covers the distribution system and the capital improvements that go to the distribution system, whereas the tap fee, the plant investment fee, is what goes up to the treatment plant itself. So that's kind of how we segment some of those funds.
So do they go into separate accounts, or are they in commingled?
Tammy, do you know the answer to that question?
On the plant investment?
Plant investment versus the rates?
The plant investment is accounted for in a different GL, and so are the metered sales. We do keep track of it separate.
So okay, so it's accounted for in different accounts, even though it may be commingled funds in a particular financial.
It all goes into the same bank account. The plant investment is accounted part of our tap fees accounted for in, the actual tap expense is in the water fund, but the plant investment revenue is in the Fund 52, which is our water acquisition. So that money goes into that fund to be used to purchase additional.
So
There's a
that's,
portion of it.
did I understand you correct, that our water acquisition and plant investment capital are accounted for in the same manner, in the same account?
Water acquisition has a separate,
Has separate GL number and separate fund, so it has its
Okay.
own reserves essentially.
Mhm. Okay, all right. And so having said all that, is there's no magic in the 50% number, is that correct?
there's no not necessarily, there's no magic. Again, modeling what Durango did, their additional units are at 50% of the,
50%,
and again, looking at what those units are going to be pulling from the water system, it's not going to be the same as a single-family house, which is that 3/4 rate. It's probably going to be in that 50 to 60%. So that's kind of where that, I don't know that I'd call it magic, but that's kind of where that theory or logic came from.
Sharp accounting, should we say that? Mandy?
So since we're talking about doing this for 2 years, if this is something that we decide on, what is your plan to be able to get this out from a community marketing standpoint, I guess is my question, because there's a lot of other obstacles in building besides water tap fees. And so if the goal is to be able to get more multifamily housing, this is a great start, but of course we all recognize that it's not going to get us to the finish line. So what does that look like?
So, we've got new zoning that's going into effect.
Right.
We've got an incentive for water plant and building permit fees for multifamily. We had the discussion on sales and use tax and that change coming. So all of these things are coming together at the same time, and I think that's, from a marketing standpoint, that's where we hand the ball over to Rick, per se.
That's the package we're
Yeah.
trying to work. So how are
Yeah.
you going to get the package out there, Rick?
It is 100% marketing. It's 100% marketing. It's putting together, well, like Ryan said, every piece of the puzzle that we can to put together. We're competing against other communities. So part of that is going to be, and I want to do some research on Durango to see how effective this has been, and take a look at how they've marketed as well. If it's been successful, not if it has not been successful.
Well, and this, for Durango, this is their everyday rate. This is not an incentive for them. This is just how they do it.
So I want to look at the mix that they have there of housing. But really, it's all about marketing and reaching out to developers and promoting our community. It's not just, we want housing, unfortunately. Just like we want industry, it's not that way at all. So it's a marketing effort, a marketing package, basically, that we need to put together.
We're also meeting with other public agencies, the school district in particular, about housing developments and what we can do as public agencies to put together a coalition of employers that are trying to tackle this issue, and potentially putting out an RFP to attract these developers. So that it's not just an RFP. It's part of that is marketing as well, to get the word out there that, hey, there's a need in this community, and this is what the package that they've put together. So I think there's a lot of different things that we're working on putting together for this, but we need the approval from council before we can do that.
Understood. Thank you.
And kind of getting back to Councilman Hawkes's point, we know that, excuse me, in looking at water fees, that we've had to increase those because we've had a shortage in essentially capital repair, where we have, older lines that need to be repaired and having the sufficient capital to do that. So this is notwithstanding my suggestion that maybe we could do it a little better, there is some risk here that we're looking at taking on behalf of the citizens, because because if we saw several major water line failures, we would be, it could leave us in somewhat dire straits,
Yeah, and we carry a very healthy reserve for
such
you know,
emergencies.
those occasions, yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay, Frank?
In closing, the only thing I want to bring up is that everything's being said here is very positive. But when we get to the point where we think we're going to have something to present to not only council, but to the public and that, we need to make sure we have sufficient amount of public hearings, because as we all know, anytime we talk about giving a discount for this and that to somebody, there's always going to be someone on the other side saying, well, why are they getting it and why can't we? So when we get that package together, let's look at that. And I appreciate the fact that you're going to see how Durango's is working and what they're doing, all that. So the more research we can do on this project, so when we get to a point where we think we have a working plan to present to whoever we're going to try to market this to, then we have those hearings so that we let everybody in the public know that this is the purpose for what we're doing. We're not going to raise your water rates to take care of what's going to happen over here, so that they're comfortable with regards to we're looking at it in a positive way for the better improvement of, Canyon City's growth and stability.
And so building off that point again, Frank, what would be our measure of success here? What would we say that if we did this 2-year program, what would we say was a success?
Well, I don't know that we have necessarily a number of units that would constitute a success, but I think bringing some multifamily to the community, which hasn't had it in more than a decade, maybe 2 decades, would, if we're successful in bringing a couple of these projects, I would say that's a success.
So multi-unit, just to make sure we're talking about the same thing, what that translates down to are apartments or condominiums?
It could be apartments or condominiums or, townhomes, sixplexes. I think what we're looking for is developments that are going to bring that missing middle housing to the community.
Okay. And so what my suggestion was going to be is that you choose some metric that you say, okay, if we get this is a success, and then run those numbers, the water usage numbers, the fees we would get for that, the lost opportunity for capital improvement funds, and maybe have some just basic numbers that you could share with us to show those, how what we would consider this to be a success, how that would work for us financially.
Yeah, we can do that. And if council's good with these numbers, then we'll, from a legal standpoint, we'll talk to the attorneys, whether it's a resolution or ordinance, and we'll schedule it as a public hearing and bring it back forward before council.
For your information, Fremont County faced a similar issue. They had a prohibition on a single-wide manufactured home from being placed on a foundation because of hangover trailer rules, as I understood it. They placed a moratorium on that and said we're not going to enforce a certain part of the code. That's how they approach that. It's a little bit different for us because we want to have a rate schedule, and so just a comment.
Yep. Thank you. I saw Commissioner McFall earlier today, and he had mentioned that. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready for presentation 3B?
Yeah, I believe so. So the next section is on the American Recovery Plan. This is legislation that was passed by Congress. It is roughly $3.5 million that will be coming to the city in 2 tranches, half this year and half next year. There are some key areas that we'd like to focus on, and we targeted some of this off of the city council retreat that we had back in March, and related it to our economic development initiatives. There is a link to the state website there that has all the different rules and everything that you need to put yourself to sleep. So our recommendations, we're currently working on calculating what any lost revenue that happened during the pandemic to the city. The legislation does allow funds to be put back into the general fund through this formula that the legislation is using. Tammy's currently working on trying to figure out that formula, and I don't know if you want to talk or say a little bit about that.
So we are, City Administrator Ryan Stevens said, we are looking to see what our lost revenue is. It looks at the 3-year growth rate prior to our base year, which was 2019 is the base year. Well, one of the issues that we're coming into is we increased our sales tax rate during that time. And I need to see how we treat that, because if we do not treat it differently, we actually would have shown an average growth rate of over 22% for those years. And with that being said, we could put everything into the revenue recovery. But I want to I need to see how that really needs to be treated. So there's still some things that we're trying to work out on that, just to make sure that the feds can't come back and say, you spent the money wrong and we need to repay it. So we want to make sure we're pretty solid on that number.
Thank you, Tammy. The other, item number 2 is project reimbursement. So there's some projects the city has completed during this particular time frame. I believe any project that was done between the end of January 2020 and the end of this funding period could be eligible for reimbursement. So water line replacements that we've already done. We did a fiber loop. That project may be eligible. We're still checking on some of these project eligibilities. We did a fiber loop for the city last year. That was about $400,000, $450,000. So those are all projects that could be eligible for reimbursement. And some of the goal here is to try and get the federal tag off of the money so it can go back to the general fund. And if it goes to the general fund, we have less restrictions, and we can use that money for other projects that are not necessarily eligible through the legislation. But the legislation does allow for these different things that we're talking about. Item number 3 is water line projects. As I mentioned, we did some water line projects as part of 2A last year. What we'd like to do is partner some of this money with 2A for 2022, specifically Reynolds. Part of the reason Reynolds has not been done is because it's a very large project. The water line under it is very old and needs to be replaced, and we need the water fund to be able to support that. With this money, we can actually move Reynolds up in the project pipeline and get Reynolds done sooner. And I know that was one that was mentioned during our retreat a few months ago as something that council would like to see done. With these funds, we could actually make that happen much sooner than where it currently fits on the timeline, which is a couple years out. Number 4 is broadband connectivity. So from an economic development standpoint, it's not just connectivity within the city. So if you look at most speeds within the city, they're decent speeds, and we have some good providers, but there is no redundancy built into the system. There's no physical redundancy, I should say. So having multiple lines coming into the community, so if there's a line that's cut out on Highway 50, that we don't go completely dark. And that's something, especially in this day and age where vendors or shops on Main Street or whoever it may be all their financial systems run off of broadband. So when they're taking their credit card payments and the internet goes out, some systems have moved to a store and pay type of system, but not everybody has. But that certainly affects business on Main Street. With the work that we're doing with the tech sector and attracting location neutral professionals to the area, the mayor did a chat with the mayor a couple months ago, and this was one of the topics that came up. Improving broadband, having connectivity to the homes. So we have a lot of high-speed connectivity to Main Street, but we don't have anybody that's providing this really good connectivity to the home. And we've had a couple discussions with a local provider that's interested in this project. Rick's working on an RFP. This is something that we would put out to bid. What we're looking at is trying to improve that connectivity and lighting up the community. This is something that a project that we could potentially partner with the county on as well, because I know that not just within Canyon City on the eastern side of Fremont County, but I know the county wants to improve connectivity to the west as well. Before I move on, Rick, do you have anything you want to say about broadband? Because I know it's been an important topic.
Could talk for a long time about broadband. It's a very important topic. It's a critical topic, actually, because it's something that, from a development perspective, from my perspective, trying to attract industry, you've got redundancy of fiber, you've got redundancy of power in a lot of respects. And quite honestly, we don't have redundancy of either right now. Ryan and I did meet with a local fiber provider who is interested in taking the initiative on this. And we're looking at it much more from what's the most appropriate approach we should take, I guess. So we haven't really nailed down any mapping of the routes. We haven't nailed down any relationship yet or any desired relationship with vendors. But it's something that we'll be looking at very soon as I get through another RFP. But it's a big topic. And from a development perspective, from a community perspective, it's one of those things that's not an amenity any longer. It's an expectation. And unfortunately, some of the expectations that are put on communities are not inexpensive to create. And this is one of those that's really an expectation, not an amenity.
And this is something that we're looking at as a public-private partnership. So, we would put in some money, but we'd be looking for a vendor to put in money as well. This is not something we're looking to fund 100% on. This is something that, you build the backbone and you have the infrastructure there, but you still need somebody that's going to build that, what we call the last mile, the fiber to the home. And, we've, as Rick said, we've had some discussions. We have another discussion scheduled for tomorrow, but we would be putting this out to RFP. We're not just selecting a vendor. This is something that would go out for competitive bid. And the final item, again, this kind of goes back onto the previous topic, but looking to see how we can use some of these funds for affordable housing projects or housing projects to jumpstart development and really trying to get those developers off of the sidelines and into the community building homes, because right now we just don't see enough homes available in the community, and there's certainly that missing middle that we continue to see for workforce level housing. What we're looking at is probably $1 million going towards waterline projects and funding water infrastructure, $1 million to $1.5 million going to broadband connectivity, and then whatever is left over through what we can figure out with revenue recovery and reimbursement would probably eat into the rest of that or some of that.
Questions, comments from council? Frank?
Well, the one thing that you just mentioned that I'm looking at here, we're getting half the money this year and half the money next year, which means we're only going to get 1.7 this year, 1.7 next year of the 3.5. And the two things that you mentioned, basically will eat it all up. I can't see where there's gonna be anything substantial left to help with the other projects. So, and I'm not trying to dissuade you from where you wanna put the money at, because when you decide where you're gonna put it, it's gonna come down to us looking at it in its perspective. But like I say, 1.7 this year, 1.7 last year, two of those projects will kill it, right there. And then there won't be anything of substantial amount of money to take care of anything the other stuff. And so, you got a hard job ahead of you with regards to this, because when we look at that, people are gonna realize that we got this kind of money, and they're gonna start asking questions when we do stuff, and they're gonna say, well, you spent this on that, and you spent this on that, and you talked about this other stuff, well, where did anything of that go, And it's all very important stuff with regards to that. And one of the things you mentioned is trying to partner with other people with regards to that. And the reason I mention that is because, as you all know, I'm on the Sanitation District Board of Directors, and we're looking at partnering with Fremont County with some of their projects. They're going in there where what they got of their money, and we can work in there and make the money a bigger sum to get different projects done and everything. So I wish you all the luck in the world, but you've got a heavy task before you and everything. It's not something simple, and nothing isn't simple right now, Just coming out of the COVID period hasn't been simple for anybody and all this other stuff, but that's just all I want to mention. Yeah. Everything that you put up there is worthwhile. There's nothing that isn't worthwhile. But we just got to look at, can we accomplish something, maybe not as much on one to help another, but, that'll be the decision that you and the staff and everything else will have to make, and then later on, bring it to council then.
Yeah, and, just a couple comments on your comments. So 1.7 this year, 1.7 next year. In all likelihood, we're going to budget all of that into next year's budget. We'll get the money this year, but we probably will not spend it this year. So it will all be accounted for into future budgets. And then the other topic that you mentioned is, they're big projects, and some of that is by design, because the way these grant funds are accounted for and having to do the paperwork on a federal grant is very time intensive. And if you can do them in a larger project so you don't have to manage a bunch of small projects, we're trying to be tactful on how we're handling this.
And if I can add to that too, a couple of these projects are revenue generators for investors, and that'd be the broadband potentially and the housing potentially. So there may be room for flex on the public side of the partnership. And we're also looking for more grants for broadband. So it's not, not relying necessarily 100% on this. So we still have some room for determining the exact partnership and who's going to put in what. And like I said, the broadband and the housing projects are revenue generators for the private partnership, private partners. So there may be some more ability for the private sector to put into these projects as well.
Mandy?
So this is probably more for Rick than anything. Some of the conversations that I've been having lately in regards to housing and construction and things with a lot of the builders, we have a lot of great local builders, but a huge shortage in new men and women coming into trade. And so many people are booked so far out, electricians, plumbers, all of these skilled trades in particularly. But even some of the, softer skilled trades, there's a huge shortage in that too. And so that's also slowing things down. There's a lot of people that have a huge desire, for example, to use a local builder, and they want to, and the builders want to do it, and they have this great skill set. But getting subcontractors to be able to come that are qualified, showing up, those types of things is becoming a huge hindrance. And so is there anything that we're doing to be able to assist that industry, because that's also a great lucrative industry, to be able to have more of those skilled trades here also? Is there anything that we're working on with that? Because it would assist other pieces.
Yeah, not, yeah, that's a tough one. That's been the discussion since I moved here in 2015. I mean, you can't find a contractor. There's some long-term stuff going on involved with the schools. We were talking about that the other day with a meeting with the schools, talking about internships and developing construction trades employees, or capable skill sets, I guess you could say. Another thing is working with, and there are some changes in the building department that have been made, changes trying to speed the process of construction along. We've gotten a number of comments from builders that they're not willing to work with the city of Canyon City. Construction trades people who are not willing to work with the city of Canyon City. So it's not a matter of are they there, it's a matter of how can we get them to work with us. And that's in the works. You know, I think that'll be a little bit of a longer term result as well, because there's a trust factor there that needs to be overcome over time, I guess you could say.
And sometimes the solutions to that, my thought would be, was that new starter, you know, people who are entering the field for the first time, who don't have that history necessarily being interested. So, I mean, I would be really interested to see, you know, even we've got TechStart and WellStart and things like that, something almost like a TradeStart type concept with
Were
the
you in a
schools.
lunch with us? Because we were talking about that very thing.
No, but it would be
Just a
really
couple
neat to
weeks
see,
ago.
because you've got so many
Yep.
ambitious, excited, skilled young men and women that are wanting to enter the workforce that aren't going through historically traditional routes. And we have these great opportunities. It just seems like a natural progression to be able to link these together,
Yes.
because this stuff is slowing down, so.
We did have a conversation recently, and I'm trying to
I
follow
wasn't a
up with
fly
that.
on the wall, I swear.
No, it's like you were, honestly. We were talking about possibly a trades sector partnership,
And
Upper Arkansas Trades
Yeah.
Sector Partnership.
And some of that is making sure we have enough activity, enough critical mass to keep them here as well, and not just branching out to Pueblo and spreading themselves across the entire region. We want to make sure we've got enough critical mass, enough projects where, you know, you bring somebody in, or somebody starts a new business that, you know, they have enough opportunity to build that business and stay here.
One thing I can say from experience as the daughter of a builder and the daughter-in-law of a builder is that sector is very unique in the value of mentorship and apprenticeship. And I think that if we approached it through that way of a real opportunity to share something with another generation, that particular industry seems to have never lost that, while so many others have. And so I think that there could be some really neat opportunities for these multifamily housing projects to be able to get some of these, you know, younger folks involved. And so, anyway, I'm rabbit
Yeah.
trailing, so I apologize, but I just thought
No,
I would
that's-
mention it.
That's all right. When we had lunch the other day with the school system, and we were talking about that very thing from a high school perspective. You know, they've got their Home by Ed program, and I said, what about, you know, you could have project management internships, you could have financing internship, you could run the whole gamut of a planned development district right there, you know, with students if you wanted to. You're absolutely right. I mean, there needs to be a way to develop tradesmen in this community, and attract tradesmen. We did lose a couple of builders shortly after I moved here, or started this position. We had conversations with a couple of home builders, and a couple of them weren't building here any longer just because they couldn't build here anymore. You know, there wasn't the need, the demand, unfortunately. And that needs to be overcome. We need to show the demand for it, like Ryan said. Yeah.
Thank you. Amy?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Just to echo a bit of what Councilmember Jaquez was mentioning, I think it's fantastic that you're looking at big, impactful projects that could really make a difference. I am a little bit concerned about the idea of the balance going to housing projects, just because I know what a huge issue affordable housing is, and I think once you take out $1 million for a water line and 1.1 to 1.5 for broadband, and then whatever we can put into the city revenue recovery and project reimbursement, you'd probably be looking at a relatively small balance. So I'd love to just hear a little bit more about what kinds of projects you're thinking about for affordable housing, and wondering if it's possible to kind of make that a little bit more substantial to make sure that we are making some good headway on it.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
some of that's still dissecting the legislation and seeing what's eligible and what's not. Going back to the previous discussion with, collaboration with the school district and other entities, we're having a lot of discussion around what level of participation should each entity be in. We don't necessarily want to be landlords to our employees, but how do you be a catalyst to these projects and get them going without overstepping what our rules are? And that's trying to find that balance is where we're at right now. And whatever that level of funding is, and if we can, the state just recently approved a bunch of different legislation, and we'll have to see if we can match these funds with any of the state programs and whether or not these funds will be eligible, because some of the state programs are being funded by ARPA money, and there's a lot of rules that we still have to work through on the affordable housing side to see what's going to be eligible. I think with the balance of it going to affordable housing, the part of that is because it has the biggest asterisk next to it right now.
Just so you know, the E911 board, which is a taxing entity, they receive fees, I guess, in the modern parlance, from all of our cell phone usage. They are very concerned about the single fiber line coming into Fremont County. There is an opportunity there for perhaps a pooling of resources or working together in some fashion on the broadband issue. I know that they would love to see a couple of fiber lines coming into here, and so there may be some synergy there. And the other thing that I would ask is, what about one of the lacks, it seems, that we have as a necessary item that has to be present for us to have robust future economic development is housing. What about no building fees for a 2-year period, and using this money for something like that? Maybe no building fees, no water tap fees, something like that.
So the legislation won't let you replace or reduce your current, well, I know it's current taxes, I don't know about current fees. They won't let you reduce your revenue some way and replace it with this. It has to be above and beyond.
Okay.
We can check on the fees side. I know there's definitely from a tax standpoint, you can't do it, but we can check and see
Is this,
on the fees side.
is this where we move from sharp accounting to cunning accounting?
Yeah, I don't know that Tammy wants to be in the middle of that audit.
Any other questions or comments from council? Ryan, do you think you have a good enough feeling for where council is coming down on these items?
I believe so. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that then, we're adjourned.